Tony Bennett sang for presidents and filled rooms for 7 decades. He showed the world what it meant to make a career out of pure, sustained dedication to craft. Tina Turner remade herself so completely she became the definition of reinvention. Leslie Jordan proved that it's never too late to become exactly who you were always meant to be. David Bowie built a career on the radical idea that an artist could refuse to stay the same, and that the audience would follow. Shannen Doherty spent decades fighting for roles, for her reputation, and in her final years, for her life. She never stopped showing up. Olivia Newton-John brought grace to every stage of her career. There are people in this world who just make you believe. There is a particular kind of American myth that gets built in public, brick by brick, until the man inside it can barely be seen at all. Brad Pitt has lived inside that myth for 3 decades and has spent just as long trying to quietly dismantle it, one unexpected role at a time. He was born William Bradley Pitt on December 18th, 1963, in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and raised in Springfield, Missouri, in a Baptist household that valued hard work and kept ambition close to the chest. His father managed a trucking company. His mother was a school counselor. There was nothing in the landscape of his childhood, the flat Midwestern roads, the Friday night football games, the church pews, that pointed toward Hollywood. And yet something in him pointed west, with a certainty he couldn't quite explain. He was 2 credits shy of a journalism degree at the University of Missouri when he packed his car and drove to Los Angeles. Not after graduation, not with a plan. 2 credits shy. That detail matters, because it tells you something about how Brad Pitt makes decisions, not recklessly, but on instinct, with a confidence that doesn't always look like confidence from the outside. He arrived in LA in 1986. He drove limousines. He wore a chicken costume to advertise a fast food chain. He took acting classes and went on auditions and did what every unknown actor in that city does. He waited. For years, the distance between who he knew he could be and what anyone else could see was enormous. The first crack of light came in 1987 with a handful of television appearances, bit parts on Dallas, 30-something, Another World. He was handsome in a way the camera couldn't ignore, but nobody yet knew what to do with that handsomeness. It took a single scene in 1991 to change everything. Thelma and Louise. He was on screen for maybe 12 minutes. He played J.D., a charming drifter with a bad heart and a devastating smile. And the world stopped. Audiences leaned forward. Critics took note. Ridley Scott's film was a phenomenon, and Brad Pitt, this unknown kid from Springfield, Missouri, had stolen a piece of it just by showing up and being fully, magnetically present. The performance was effortless in the way that only deeply prepared things look effortless. But here is where the story gets complicated, because what happened next is not the story of a talent being nurtured. It is the story of a face being sold. The years immediately following Thelma and Louise were a lesson in the gap between what Hollywood sees and what it offers. Pitt was suddenly the most talked-about new face in the business, and the industry responded by wanting to put that face in posters. A River Runs Through It, in 1992, showed he could carry emotion and silence on screen with genuine craft, but the cultural conversation was almost entirely about his looks. He appeared on magazine covers. He was called the most beautiful man in the world, with a frequency that would have embarrassed a saint. He took it mostly, but you can see, if you watch the interviews from those years, a faint strain behind the eyes. A man who knows he is being discussed in terms he did not audition for. The answer was a series of choices that, taken together, read like a deliberate argument. In 1994, he played a vampiric, dangerous Louis in Interview with the Vampire alongside Tom Hanks, and then, in the same year, appeared as the feral, barely coherent early Grace in California, a low-budget thriller that required him to be genuinely frightening. These were not the choices of a man chasing stardom. These were the choices of a man trying to earn his own respect. And then came Seven in 1995, and everything shifted again. David Fincher's pitch-black thriller paired Pitt with Morgan Freeman in a story about serial murder and moral collapse. Pitt played Detective David Mills, eager, volatile, ultimately broken by the film's devastating final act. The performance was raw and unguarded in ways his earlier work had only hinted at. And the film was a massive commercial and critical success. For the first time, the actor and the movie star occupied the same body, and audiences felt it. What followed was a run of films that, in retrospect, looks almost like a manifesto. 12 Monkeys in 1995 earned him his first Academy Award nomination, playing a twitching, frantic mental patient in a Terry Gilliam time travel nightmare. He was unrecognizable in the best possible way. Fight Club in 1999, directed again by Fincher, cast him as Tyler Durden, an anarchic, philosophical phantom who may or may not exist, and became one of the defining cultural objects of its decade. Snatch in 2000 showed an almost comedic physicality, a willingness to be absurd. The Coen brothers' Burn After Reading in 2008 gave him a deliriously dim personal trainer named Chad, and he played it with perfect comic commitment. The through line in all of these is the same. He kept choosing strangeness over safety. Alongside all of this, of course, there was the other story, the one the tabloids were far more interested in. His marriage to Jennifer Aniston in 2000 made the two of them together into something resembling American royalty. They were everywhere, their faces on every checkout line magazine, their relationship discussed with a familiarity that neither of them had invited. And when the marriage ended in 2005, following his relationship with Angelina Jolie on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the cultural noise became deafening. The public narrative around that period was reductive in the way public narratives tend to be. Complex human beings were flattened into tabloid archetypes. What was actually happening inside any of those lives? The pressure, the loneliness, the specific weight of being one of the most photographed people on the planet, while also being a person with a private interior, was not a conversation anyone in the media was particularly interested in having. Pitt has, over the years, spoken with some candor about the cost of that period. In interviews, he has described using substances to dull the noise, feeling disconnected from himself, going through long stretches where he was functioning professionally while privately running on empty. He has talked about therapy, about sobriety, about the slow work of understanding what actually matters to him. Not with the language of public confession, but with the measured honesty of someone who has done the work and is not interested in performing it. The years with Jolie were also years of remarkable public commitment, to adoption, to humanitarian work, to building a large and complicated and very visible family. The Brangelina era, as the press labeled it, was one of the most scrutinized partnerships in modern celebrity history. When it ended in 2016, the scrutiny intensified rather than eased. Custody proceedings played out in public, allegations surfaced and were contested. The man who had once simply been the most beautiful actor in Hollywood was now navigating something genuinely difficult in front of an audience of millions. What is striking, watching his career during this period, is how little any of it seemed to slow him down professionally, or perhaps more accurately, how hard he was working to stay focused on work as a kind of anchor. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button in 2008 earned him his second Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. Moneyball in 2011 was perhaps his most interior performance to date, quiet, precise, a portrait of a man who sees the world differently than everyone around him and pays a price for it. The film felt autobiographical in a way nobody said out loud. Inglourious Basterds in 2009 gave him Aldo Raine, a gloriously oversized wartime fantasy figure played with a gleeful commitment that reminded you he could be simply, unambiguously fun. 12 Years a Slave in 2013, which he produced through his company Plan B Entertainment, won the Academy Award for Best Picture, a reminder that his ambitions had long since expanded beyond acting alone. Plan B has become one of the more quietly significant production companies in contemporary Hollywood. The Departed, Moonlight, Kick-Ass, World War Z, The Big Short. These are not the projects of a man coasting on his name. These are the projects of someone who has developed a genuine eye for material and a willingness to back difficult, unconventional stories with real resources. And then, in 2019, Quentin Tarantino gave him Cliff Booth in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and something crystallized. The performance won him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. But more than the award, what the performance did was offer a kind of complex self-portrait. Cliff Booth is a man with a past he doesn't fully disclose, an easy charm that masks something harder underneath, a physical confidence that is both genuine and slightly melancholy. He is in some ways the most honest role Brad Pitt has ever played, not because it is autobiographical, but because it asked him to bring everything he had learned about himself and his image to a single, beautifully written character, and let the audience see all of it at once. His acceptance speech that night, casual, funny, briefly pointed about the film's themes and his own long road, was the speech of a man who had stopped trying to manage what people thought of him and had arrived, finally, at something closer to ease. The work since then has been deliberate and varied. Bullet Train in 2022 leaned into physical comedy and absurdist action with evident enjoyment. F1, his upcoming film produced with Apple and directed by Joseph Kosinski, signals a continued appetite for big canvas, technically ambitious projects. He has been working with ceramics and sculpture, exhibiting work in London, engaging with art in a way that is not a celebrity hobby, but a genuine extension of his creative life. He has spoken about architecture and design with the specificity of someone who has been paying close attention for a long time. There is a version of Brad Pitt's story that is about beauty and fame and the damage they do. That version is not wrong, it is just incomplete. The more interesting version is about a man from Missouri who drove to Los Angeles with 2 credits missing from his degree, who spent years being told what he was before figuring out who he was, who built a career out of the gap between those 2 things. The public image was real. The private cost was real. And what remains, after all of it, the marriages, the tabloids, the Oscar, the long sobriety, the sculpture, the production company, the ongoing work, is something that looks less like a myth and more like a person. Still working. Still choosing strangeness over safety. Still, in the best sense,